Hello everyone, my name is Taryn Rehovot, and this is the effect of feedback on estimates of reaching ability in virtual reality. We had two main research questions. The first is that we were curious if reaching estimates could be improved by providing participants with feedback. The second was, does the type of reaching either up above one's head or out in front of yourself result in different affordance judgments, specifically in virtual reality? A few important pieces of background info before we dive into the experiment. The first is how an affordance is defined, which is the opportunity for action based on the current environment. It's also important to mention that in past work, reaching out is typically overestimated, meaning that people think they can reach further than they actually can, while reaching up is underestimated, so people tend to be able to reach higher than they actually think. This was a within subject design with an N of 18. We conducted our experiment using the HTC Vive Pro, and our virtual environment was modeled after the Great Hall from Harry Potter. Consistent with this theme, the targets that participants were using to estimate their reaching capabilities was a floating broom and a snitch. The floating broom was our target for reaching up, so the broom would float above participants' heads, and the snitch was the target for reaching out horizontally in front of them. For each affordance type, we had two types of trials, feedback and adjustment. In adjustment trials, without moving their arms, participants used a Vive controller to position the target, either the broom or the snitch, to where they perceived it to be just reachable. In feedback trials, participants verbally reported whether they thought they could reach the target, then they physically reached toward the target with their arms, receiving visual motor feedback on the accuracy of their judgments. The experiment consisted of 5 total blocks. Block 0 had 2 adjustment trials only, and blocks 1 through 4 started with 2 feedback trials, then finished with 2 adjustment trials. In feedback trials, the target distance were scaled to participants' actual reaching ability and presented in the following order. Block 1 was plus or minus 30% of the actual reach, Block 2 is plus or minus 20%, Block 3 was plus or minus 10%, and Block 4 was plus or minus 5%. On the right here, you can see a few screenshots of what the environment actually looked like for the participants as they went through the experiment, with the broom being the reaching up target and the snitch being the reaching out. Here's a video further demonstrating the task. What you're seeing here is the participant in the adjustment phase, positioning the target to where they perceive it to be just reachable. All right, now they're moving on to the feedback phase. The participant is making a verbal report of whether or not they think they could reach the target. Then they're actually reaching out with the controller to receive their feedback. The perceived reachable distances set during the adjustment trials were recorded in meters and converted to ratios. A ratio of 1 would indicate that the participant set the object exactly at their reach ability. A ratio less than 1 would mean underestimation of reachability, and a ratio greater than 1 indicates overestimation of reachability. As you can see here, as blocks progressed and the participants gained more feedback, their affordance ratios got closer to 1. We conducted a repeated measures ANOVA to investigate how ratios changed with feedback across blocks for each reaching affordance. We also conducted planned comparisons to compare blocks. In line with our first hypothesis, reaching out judgments were overestimated. However, reaching up judgments were not underestimated. One possible reason for this could be that distances in virtual environments were underestimated. If distances were perceived to be close, then they would be also perceived to be more reachable, resulting in participants overestimating their reaching capability. Our second hypothesis, that feedback could improve reaching estimates in VR, was supported. However, feedback affected the reaching affordances differently. This is likely due to the fact that reaching up judgments were already fairly accurate at baseline, whereas reaching out judgments were overestimated. I'd like to thank my co-authors, as well as the National Science Foundation and the Office of Naval Research for supporting this work, and thank you for listening.